Olive Kensington yanked the stranger's hand without even looking up, desperate to escape the awkward conversation with her ex's new fiancé, who had just cornered her near the open bar. "Dance with me," Olive said under her breath, dragging the man onto the dance floor as the live string quartet launched into a slow waltz. The stranger blinked, clearly surprised, but his hand tightened around hers almost instantly. "Well, hello to you too." She finally looked up. Oh no. He was stupidly handsome. Clean-shaven jaw, perfectly tousled dark hair, and a confident tilt to his mouth that screamed trouble. His tailored tuxedo fit like it had been made for him, which, judging by the way he carried himself, it probably had. "I just needed to get away," she said quickly. "You don't have to actually dance, just stand here. Pretend." He raised an eyebrow and placed his other hand on her waist. "You pulled me onto the floor and now you want to stand still? I didn't expect you to be. This," she muttered. This, she gestured vaguely at his stupidly perfect face. "You look like you belong on a billboard." He chuckled, deep and amused. "You're nervous." "I'm not nervous," she lied, trying not to notice how warm his hand felt through the thin material of her navy blue dress. "I just don't usually fake dance with strangers to escape my ex's engagement party." "Well, I'm honored." He twirled her effortlessly, and she had no choice but to follow his lead as they slid into a graceful rhythm. "Is that the ex glaring at us from the champagne tower?" Olive didn't turn to look. "Probably. His name's Mason. He dumped me 6 months ago and now he's marrying his assistant. That's her Tiffany. Tiffany with the annoying laugh." "Ah," the man said, voice low. "So this is revenge dancing." "Exactly," she hesitated. "Thank you, by the way, for playing along," he smiled, warm and teasing. "You still haven't asked for my name." Olive blinked. "Right. Okay, what's your name?" "Caden Ellis," he said smoothly, extending a hand between them mid-dance. "And you are Olive Kensington." He repeated it like he liked the taste of it. "Olive," she rolled her eyes. "Don't get any ideas, this is strictly a one-song partnership." "Of course," Caden said, his voice a little too innocent. They danced through the entire song and then another. Somehow, Olive forgot to let go. She forgot to care that Mason was watching. She forgot to care about anything except the way Caden was looking at her. "You're good at this," she murmured. "I should be," he said. "My mother made me take ballroom lessons growing up. Let me guess. Wealthy family. Hamptons in the summer. Boarding school, you're not far off." "Well, I work at a community arts center and live with my sister's dog, so I'm definitely not your type." Caden looked at her like she'd said something ridiculous. "You don't know what my type is. I can take a wild guess." The song ended and she stepped away, expecting him to thank her politely and disappear into the crowd, but instead he followed her off the floor. "Why are you still here?" she asked, half laughing. "Because I like you," he said simply, and something in his tone made her chest squeeze. "And because I'm not nearly done dancing with you." Her face flushed. "I told you this was a one-song thing." "Then let's pretend we didn't count." She bit her lip, torn between walking away and staying exactly where she was. From the corner of the ballroom, Mason and Tiffany were both still staring. Olive turned back to Caden. "Fine. But I'm not giving you my number." "Good," he said, offering his arm. "Because I'm about to ask you to dinner instead." She blinked. "You're serious?" "Dead serious. I just met you." "Exactly," Caden said, his eyes twinkling. "And I don't want to stop." Before she could think of a clever excuse, he was already leading her toward the valet line. "Wait, what car are you?" Caden handed a black card to the valet, who nodded and practically sprinted off. Moments later, a sleek black Aston Martin pulled up to the curb. Olive's jaw dropped. "This is yours." Caden opened the door for her. "Are you getting in or ready to admit you're curious?" She hesitated exactly 1 second before sliding into the leather seat. The car smelled like clean leather and something expensive she couldn't name. They drove through the city in silence for a few minutes. Then Caden glanced at her. "Still think I'm not your type?" She looked out the window, heart pounding. "I still think this is crazy." "Good," he said. "I like crazy." Dinner turned out to be at a rooftop restaurant so exclusive, the host greeted Caden by name and pulled out Olive's chair himself. She didn't even see a menu. Did you already order?" she asked once the waiter left. "I know what they do best." He looked at her, eyes softening. "You're still trying to figure me out. You're just not what I expected, neither are you," she laughed. "I'm not interesting." "You're not boring," he corrected. "You're smart, sarcastic, and you didn't fall all over me the second you saw the car. That's rare. Maybe I'm just slow. Maybe you're just real." Their food arrived, perfectly seared steak for him, handmade pasta for her. She didn't ask how he knew what she liked, she just ate. And when dessert came chocolate mousse with raspberry coulis, he leaned closer. "Tell me more about you," he said. "What do you want?" she blinked. "Like in life?" "Yeah," Olive hesitated. "I want to open my own dance studio someday, not just for kids. For anyone who wants to move and feel alive." He smiled like she just told him the secret to the world. "That's beautiful. No one's ever called it that." "Well," he said, lifting his wine glass, "then they weren't paying attention." The night ended with him walking her to her apartment door. They stood there for a long moment, neither moving. "You really surprised me," she said softly. Caden nodded. "You surprised me too." She started to turn, but his hand caught hers. "Would you go out with me again?" he asked quietly. "Properly this time." She looked up at him, heart racing. "Okay," she whispered. "Yes." And just like that, everything began. The first time Olive saw Caden again, he was standing in the middle of her studio, watching her teach a group of seniors how to foxtrot. She almost dropped her water bottle. "Keep your frame strong, Eleanor," Olive called out automatically, her voice catching slightly. "Don't let Harold lead you off the floor again." "I'm not leading her off the floor," Harold grumbled. "She's dragging me." The class laughed. But Olive's eyes stayed locked on the tall figure leaning against the doorframe in a slate gray overcoat, arms crossed, watching her with something dangerously close to admiration. When the hour ended and her students began collecting their things, Caden didn't move. He just waited. She walked over slowly, pulse kicking up. "You're either lost," she said, "or you've developed an unusual interest in community dance classes." "I was curious," he replied, unfolding his arms. "You talked about your dream the other night. I wanted to see it." She blinked. "How did you even find this place?" I asked around. "Who did you ask?" "The bartender from the gala. He remembered you, said you left behind your scarf." Olive narrowed her eyes. "You tracked me down over a scarf." "No," he said. "I tracked you down because I wanted to see you again, and I figured you'd be more impressed if I turned up here instead of sending roses and a driver." She tried not to show it, but a smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. "You really don't like doing things the normal way, do you?" "I don't think you do either," he said, stepping closer. "Go to lunch with me. I have a class in an hour. Then I'll walk with you to wherever you're getting food." Olive glanced at the wall clock. "You're relentless." "I'm interested." The small cafe across the street was nearly empty. They sat at a corner table near the window while Olive picked at a spinach wrap and Caden drank black coffee. She waited for the inevitable questions, the ones men usually asked when they were trying to decide if she was worth pursuing. But Caden didn't ask about her relationship history, or what her parents did, or where she saw herself in 5 years. He asked about her students. "Do any of them remind you of yourself?" he asked. Olive looked up in surprise. "Not really. Most of them are more fearless." "You don't seem afraid of much." "I'm not afraid of things," she said. "I'm afraid of wasting time. Of hoping for something that doesn't last." Caden nodded slowly, like he understood more than he was letting on. "What about you?" she asked. "What's the thing you don't say at dinner parties?" He didn't answer right away. Then he set his cup down and leaned back. "I don't like being told who I'm supposed to be." "That sounds like something a very rich man would say." "Does it?" "Yes," Olive replied, "because people with trust funds don't usually have to justify their choices." He didn't laugh. "That's what people think. That money makes everything easier, but it doesn't fix the pressure, it just changes it." She studied him. "So what do your parents want you to be?" "Predictable," he said. "Respectable. Married to someone with a name that looks good on a country club roster, Olive raised an eyebrow. And instead you're crashing dance classes and stalking bartenders for leads on women you met one time. He smiled for real then. Exactly. Later that night, after her classes ended and the building emptied out, Olive found a box sitting on the front counter with a single note tucked beneath the ribbon, for the woman who moves the world when she dances. She opened it carefully and gasped. Inside was a pair of custom-made satin ballroom shoes, her exact size, dyed a deep plum with delicate silver stitching across the toe. She turned the note over, no name, just a phone number and a time. 7. She swore under her breath, then glanced at the clock. It was 6:15. She made it to the address by 7 on the dot, legs aching from an 8-hour day, adrenaline driving her forward. The building was a converted warehouse in Tribeca. 2 glass doors opened into a private gallery space lit by hanging Edison bulbs and curated with massive black and white photographs of dancers mid-motion, suspended in midair. Caden stood in the center of the room, hands in his pockets. "You're insane," she said without preamble. "I prefer committed. You bought out an entire gallery." "I own the gallery." She stared at him. He took a step forward. "I wanted to give you something, a space that feels like you." Her voice was weak when she answered. "Why? Because you make me want to be better," he said. "And because when I watched you teach earlier, I realized I'd never seen anyone so alive." She swallowed hard, unsure what to do with the feeling rising in her chest. "You barely know me." "I know enough." She shook her head. "You're not supposed to do things like this." "I've never cared much for rules." They stood there in silence for a moment, the hum of the city outside muffled behind thick glass. Then she stepped forward and reached for his hand, her voice steady. "Dance with me." He didn't hesitate. There was no music, just the sound of their breath and the quiet echo of their feet on the polished floor. No choreography. No audience. Just 2 people moving toward something neither of them could name but both of them felt. When they finally stopped, his hand lingered at her back. "I want to see you again," he said quietly. "You already are," she replied. He touched her cheek, fingers brushing like a question, and this time she didn't pull away. The invitation arrived 3 days later. Thick cream cardstock, her name written in looping calligraphy, no return address. Just the words, "You're invited to an evening of impossible things. Car picks you up at 6. Olive stood in the doorway of her apartment, the card trembling slightly in her hand. She'd told herself she wouldn't fall into this, that she'd keep her head. That whatever strange, glittering world Caden belonged to, it wasn't one she had any business stepping into. But here she was, stepping into it anyway. At precisely 6 o'clock, a vintage Rolls-Royce pulled up to the curb. The driver, dressed in a crisp black suit, opened the door without saying a word. She climbed in, heart rattling somewhere between suspicion and anticipation. The car glided through the city like it owned the streets, bypassing traffic with backstreet turns and subtle power. When they stopped, she found herself in front of a townhouse in Gramercy Park. Not a modern glass fortress like she'd imagined, but a historic brownstone covered in ivy, warm light glowing from the windows. The door opened before she knocked. "You came," Caden said, leaning casually against the frame, sleeves rolled to his elbows, barefoot. "You invited me to an evening of impossible things. I had to at least find out what that meant." He stepped aside. "Come in, I made dinner." Olive paused in the doorway. "You cook." "Not often." But I was feeling reckless. She followed him through a long hallway lined with old photographs, not art gallery pieces this time, personal photos. A woman in a garden, a boy on a sailboat, Caden at a piano, much younger, frowning in concentration. "You live here?" she asked. "Sometimes." "It was my grandmother's. She left it to me." She opened her mouth to ask more but stopped when she saw the dining room. A long wooden table was set for 2, candles flickering in mismatched holders. The scent of roasted garlic and something rich she couldn't place hung in the air. Caden pulled out a chair for her. "I'm suspicious," she said as she sat. "This is too charming. What's the catch?" "There isn't one." You're not going to pull a curtain and reveal a wall of paparazzi? That was tomorrow, he said dryly. Tonight you're safe. The food was better than she expected: steak with rosemary butter, charred carrots, and some kind of risotto she couldn't stop eating. Okay, she said halfway through, I give up. How do you know how to cook like this? I used to spend summers in Tuscany, he said, not looking at her. Of course you did. My grandfather didn't believe in staff. If we wanted to eat, we learned how. She tilted her head. So underneath the tailored suits and million-dollar cars, you're really just an underfed Italian farm boy. He met her eyes. Would that make me less intimidating? I never said you were intimidating. You've been holding your fork like a weapon since you sat down. She set it down deliberately. I'm not used to this. What part? All of it. The invitations, the surprise shoes. The candlelight dinner in a townhouse that probably costs more than every apartment on my block combined. Caden leaned forward. Then tell me what you are used to. Olive hesitated. Honesty, she finally said. Even when it's messy, especially when it's messy. He nodded once slowly. Then I should tell you something, her breath caught. I didn't just happen to be at that gala the night we met, he said. I was supposed to be meeting someone. Someone like a date. No, he hesitated. A potential investor. My family's company is going public. There was a lot riding on that evening. She folded her hands in her lap. And instead you danced with a nobody from Brooklyn. You're not a nobody. Compared to you, I'm invisible. I saw you, he said quietly. And I haven't stopped. Olive looked away, unsure what to do with the thing blooming in her chest. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something close, something dangerous. You didn't have to track me down, she said. You could have chalked it up to a good night and moved on. I didn't want to move on. She looked back at him. Why? Because I've been surrounded by people who want things from me my whole life. But you didn't ask for anything. You just grabbed my hand and pulled me into your mess for a minute. It was the most honest moment I've had in years. She stood slowly, needing space to think. Caden rose too, stepping aside as she wandered into the parlor connected to the dining room. A grand piano sat in the corner, old and polished, its keys slightly yellowed. She ran her fingers over it. Do you still play? He came up behind her. Not well. Show me. Caden hesitated, then sat and touched the keys. A few faltering chords, then a soft melody began to emerge, halting, imperfect, but strangely beautiful. She sat beside him, watching his profile as he played. You're not what I expected either, she said. He stopped. What did you expect? Someone who'd get bored the second I didn't fall at his feet. I'm still waiting for that, by the way. You'll be waiting a long time. Good, he said. I'm not in a rush. She turned to face him fully. What is this to you? A challenge? No, he said. It's a choice. There was a long silence between them. Then Olive said, I don't trust easily. I'm not asking you to. And I won't pretend to be someone I'm not. I'd be disappointed if you did. She looked at him for a long time, trying to find the flaw, the crack, the thing that would make all of this make sense. But all she saw was a man looking at her like she was the only real thing in a world built on performance. I should go, she whispered. I'll walk you out. He didn't try to kiss her, didn't touch her, just opened the door and watched her leave. But as the car pulled away, she looked back once and caught him still standing there, hands in his pockets, watching like something important had just slipped through his fingers. And in the quiet of the ride home, Olive realized her heart wasn't racing anymore. It was waiting. Olive stood alone in the wings of the old community theater, her palms pressed together as the final applause roared through the room. The showcase had ended. Her dancers, from teenagers to retirees, had just performed the first full-length recital under her direction. She should have felt triumphant. Instead, she felt like her chest was caught between two heartbeats, one hers, the other undeniably Caden's. She hadn't seen him in a week. Not since the night she'd left his townhouse without letting him kiss her, without promising anything at all. She'd needed space. Time to figure out what he was, and what it would mean to let him matter. Her phone buzzed in her jacket pocket backstage, but she didn't check it. Instead, she stepped out onto the edge of the stage as the lights dimmed and her dancers exited to cheers. There was a bouquet waiting in the wings, not an ordinary one. The stems were wrapped in velvet ribbon, the blooms deep shades of amber and ivory, no card, but she already knew he hadn't pushed, not once, no calls, no questions. So why did she feel like she'd been holding her breath since the moment she walked away? She descended the stage steps slowly, weaving through the crowd congratulating her students. Parents, friends, donors, a few board members, and then her heart stuttered. He was there. Standing at the back of the auditorium, hands clasped behind him. No suit this time. Just a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled, dark pants, and an expression she couldn't decode. Their eyes met. He didn't move, neither did she, then after what felt like years she did. He met her halfway down the aisle, the noise faded, the crowd blurred, and when she stopped in front of him, she didn't say anything right away. He beat her to it. "You didn't call," Caden said quietly. "I didn't know what to say." "I would have waited." "I know," she said. "That's what scared me." He dipped his head slightly, his voice lower now. "I didn't want to be a distraction. You weren't." "Then what was I?" She took a breath. "You were everything I didn't think I could have." He looked at her like he was memorizing the lines of her face. "I'm not perfect, Olive. I'm not asking you to be. I've made mistakes, so have I. But I've never met anyone who made me want to change what I thought I needed," he said. "Until you." Her fingers curled into the hem of her dress. "I didn't grow up with any of this. The houses, the cars, the way people look at you like you belong to a different world. I don't care about that world," he said. "I care about yours." She shook her head slightly. "You say that now, but what happens when I can't fit into it? I'll fit into yours instead." Her eyes searched his. "You mean that?" "I mean every word." She stepped forward and he caught her hands in his. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she said, "You're the only person who's ever made me feel like I could be more without pretending to be someone else." "You don't have to pretend," he said. "You're already more." Her voice was barely a whisper. "I missed you." He let out something between a breath and a laugh. "I've been showing up to empty dance studios hoping you'd just appear. You left flowers. I didn't think I deserved to leave a note." She reached up, fingers brushing his jaw. "You're infuriating, so you've told me. And a little arrogant, guilty. But you make me feel seen," she said, her voice cracking just slightly. "Like I'm not just surviving, like I'm allowed to want something for myself." "You are," he said fiercely. "You're allowed to want everything." She stepped into his arms and he held her like he'd been waiting years. Then, in the center of the auditorium, surrounded by empty rows and the fading echo of applause, he kissed her. Not like a man who was trying to impress her. Not like a man who wanted to own her, but like someone who finally understood what it meant to lose something real and wasn't going to let go again. When they parted, Olive leaned her forehead against his. "I don't need a penthouse or a driver," she said. "But if you ever try to buy me another pair of shoes without asking my size again, I'll throw them at you." "Deal," he said, his smile slow and certain. Later that evening, they walked through the city together, no car, no cameras, no plans. Just breathing the same air, shoulder to shoulder. "You know," she said, glancing at him sideways, "this whole thing started because I grabbed a stranger's hand without looking." He looked down at their fingers, still intertwined. "Best decision I've ever been part of. I didn't even see your face. And I didn't see yours." She stopped walking. "Do you think maybe that's why it worked?" Caden turned to her, his expression serious now. "No," he said. "It worked because you didn't let go." He paused, then added, "And neither will I." 2 weeks later, her studio reopened in a new location, one with floor-to-ceiling windows, sprung oak floors, and a lobby filled with framed photos of her students mid-motion. He hadn't told her how he pulled it off. He just handed her the keys and said, "You deserve a space as strong as you are." He never asked her to move in. Instead, he showed up after her classes with takeout and flowers that didn't match, and once with no warning a jazz trio that played while she danced barefoot across the empty floor. And every time she looked at him, she saw the truth. She hadn't picked the wrong partner that night, she'd picked the only one who could keep up. And in the end, he wasn't the one who'd fallen hardest, they both had. Together, exactly as it was always meant to be. Olive stood at the edge of the garden terrace, the late spring breeze lifting strands of her hair as lilacs perfumed the air. The gala was in full swing behind her, an elegant fundraiser for arts education across the city, and for the first time, she wasn't there as a tag-along or someone's plus one. She was the guest of honor. A year ago, she would have laughed at the idea. Now, she was standing beneath a canopy of white roses and hanging lanterns, wearing a silk gown that shimmered like moonlight, her name on the program, her studio listed as the chief beneficiary. And across the crowd, Caden was watching her like he still couldn't believe she was real, trying to disappear again. His voice came softly behind her. She turned, lips curving. Just needed a minute to breathe. You certainly know how to throw a party. He stepped beside her, adjusting the gold cufflink on his left wrist. I had help. Lillian insisted on the flower arrangements. Your assistant. She's really more of a fixer, and she likes you, he added. Said you're the only person who ever asked her how she takes her coffee. I like knowing how people take their coffee, she said simply. It tells you everything. He tilted his head. What does it tell you about me? That you take yours black, but you're secretly a dessert person. He laughed, the sound richer than the wine they'd been served earlier. Guilty, and what about you? What does your decaf hazelnut latte say? That I'm complicated but worth the effort. Caden turned to face her fully, his expression shifting into something quieter. You know, there's something I've been meaning to ask. She raised an eyebrow. If it involves another surprise jazz trio, I'm going to need 24 hours notice. No music, no flowers, just a question. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a small, worn envelope, the edges creased like it had been opened more than once. I found this, he said, in my grandmother's journals. She used to write letters to people she never sent. This one had your name on it. Olive blinked. What? She used to volunteer at a community center in Queens, taught beginner ballet. Said there was a little girl with bruised knees and too many questions who refused to dance unless the music was the Blue Danube. Olive's breath caught. That was me. I know. He handed her the letter. She unfolded it slowly, the ink faded but legible. Her name was at the top, and the words that followed made her eyes sting. Keep dancing, Olive. You already shine. One day the world will see it too. Her hands trembled. I never knew she remembered me, she whispered. She never forgot you, Caden said. She kept the letter hidden in her favorite book. I think she always hoped you'd find your way back. Olive looked up at him, eyes wet. You didn't have to show me this. I wanted you to know you mattered long before you met me. The music from the ballroom swelled, a slow waltz drifting through the open doors. Caden held out his hand. May I have this dance, she nodded, unable to speak. They danced under the stars, the garden lights casting golden halos around them. He held her close, one hand at her waist, the other clasping hers like he'd never let go. After a long moment, he said, There's something else. She looked up. I bought the building next to your studio, she pulled back slightly. Why? I want to turn it into a scholarship center for kids who can't afford classes. Music, dance, art, everything your studio can't hold, her mouth parted. You're serious? I'm always serious when it comes to you. But why do all of this? Because I love you, he said simply. And loving you means building the kind of world you believe in. She stared at him, heart full. I don't need any of it, I know. That's why I want to give it to you. She kissed him then, soft and sure, in the middle of a garden filled with city elite and strangers who'd never seen a love built from something so real. Later that summer, the Scholarship Center opened its doors. Olive named it after Caden's grandmother, Margaret House, and on the first day, she taught a free dance class to 15 children and 4 adults, none of whom had ever set foot in a studio before. Caden showed up halfway through, ties loosened, jacket slung over his arm. He sat in the back, watching her with that same quiet intensity, never interrupting, just there, After the last student left, she walked over and leaned against the bar beside him. "You're late," she teased. "I got stuck in a board meeting," he said. "They don't take kindly to me disappearing before the second course. You missed a few pirouettes and a lot of falling," he kissed her temple. "You're radiant," she rolled her eyes. "You say that every time I'm covered in sweat. I mean it every time." That night, they walked home together under a sky streaked with violet and gold. No drivers, no headlines, just two people who had found each other in a city that never stopped spinning. And when they reached their brownstone, the one they'd renovated together, brick by brick he unlocked the door and scooped her up without a word, carrying her across the threshold like it was the first night of forever. Because it was. They lived without pretense. Mornings filled with music and mismatched mugs and choreographed chaos. Afternoons where he'd slip into her class just to watch her move. Evenings spent on the rooftop watching the city breathe. They didn't need to say "I love you" every day. Their actions did. In the way, she always saved him the last bite. In the way, he never left the house without kissing her forehead. In the way, they turned their love into something bigger than both of them. And when she found out she was pregnant on a rainy Thursday, barefoot in their kitchen, he didn't say a word at first. Just dropped to his knees and pressed his lips to her stomach, tears in his eyes. They named their daughter Margaret. And years later, at the same gala where it all began, Olive stood at the podium, her husband at her side, and said, "This isn't a fairy tale, it's better. Because we didn't fall into magic, we built it." And the applause that followed wasn't for the success or the spotlight. It was for the love that had grown in the unlikeliest place between a girl who danced in borrowed shoes and a man who had everything, until he realized the only thing he truly wanted was someone who saw him for who he was, and never stopped.